Hey, everybody. So, this podcast actually features one of our own Kana members, Pat Durante. He is a regular at the 5:30 a.m. and has been a member for about 2 years. Pat recently ran his third 100-mile ultra marathon trail race. And I wanted to get him on the podcast to ask him about what it's like to run for literally a day. His last run, it came in at slightly under 24 hours, which was a PR for him. He came into the next class after his weekend run and said that he PR'd by 5.5 hours. So I definitely wanted to get him on the podcast and ask him about everything related to running for that long, what it's like mentally, physically, like what he eats, how he trains for it, and his journey in terms of running his third 100-mile race. So hope you enjoy this. If you have any questions, then just go ahead and email us info@kana.fit, and we can always get you in touch with him if you have anything specific to ultra running. All right, here's Pat Durante. Okay, so we have Pat Durante, 5:30 a.m.er at Kana Fitness on the podcast, and ultimately we are here to talk about his latest 100-mile race, which is just bonkers in my mind, but we will get to that. Pat, why don't you give a little bit of background as to who you are, what you do for a living, and wherever you want to go in terms of background.
Sure. All right. So background, I guess I'll start with my fitness background first. I got into, just like everybody else that gets into running, it started with a 5K. I used to live in South Philly, and it was a very popular location to go was Boathouse Row, Kelly Drive. And, I would go there with my father was also big into running. It's kind of where this kind of stems from. As a kid, there was a local track that he would, go to every day after work. He would drag me down there. I think there was like the long jump sand pit. So I'd be playing in the sand pit and he was just doing, loop after loop. I don't know if that had a subconscious effect on, running, but obviously, it did something. So fast forward, I actually didn't get into running up until I would say it was more in college. I did not run for college, but it was like around college time, and I think around 2000, I started to just get into 5Ks, doing them very casually. One of them was the out and back on Kelly Drive. I think I remember it was like one of my first races. Broad Street was also a very big race, being in Philly, and also my home being right off of, when they run down Broad Street, we were right off of on Rittner, right near Methodist Hospital. So, my dad was also, he dragged me to that race. We did that as, that was my first like big race, big, something over a 5K.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So that's where the start of running in. And as for my career, I'm in IT, work at like for web hosting data centers that were actually based in Philadelphia. And what happened is with COVID, and we just ended up closing down the data center. All the employees ended up moving to working from home, and so obviously that gives me lots of time to do training and CrossFit and all those type of fun activities.
Cool. So let's back up. So your dad would like drag you to the track while he ran.
Yeah.
Do you know what kind of distances he was running?
He ran since I think he was like 14. He did mostly track events. I think he did I want to say he did the longer events in track, which would be maybe the 5,000 meter.
Okay.
But when he was dragging me down to the track, he would probably do 3 to 5 miles at a time. I don't remember him doing very long distances because it would he'd come home from work, we'd go run, he'd run a few miles and we'd go back home for dinner. So it was nothing ever crazy.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, it was just like Broad Street, the distance run. Those were the first races that started. And then from there, another thing that he did, we would go outside of the city and we'd drive all the way up to Forbidden Drive in the Wissahickon. So this is where like the trails come in. And so another thing he did, And he denies this, but he would run on Forbidden Drive, and then he would just let me go off into the woods, and I would just, explore the trails. Remember hiking around, and I swear I was no older than 10 or 11. I just couldn't imagine doing that with my own kids.
Yeah, you'd be arrested these days for doing that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, like, so I would just go off and adventure on the trails, and he was always running on Forbidden Drive, and then I'd come back down, I would meet him, and then we'd head back home. So there was like, I think also the start of trail running, which also
Mm.
leads into some of this, what these ultras are about. They're normally done on trails. They're not, the majority of them are not done on road or asphalt.
Got it. Okay. So you would see him doing these races, and then when was your first race? Did you run in high school? Did you run in school, college?
It was, I want to say it was that race that was on Kelly Drive, and it was then shortly after that, it was like the big thing was to me and my father to do Broad Street.
Okay.
So I remember signing up for that, and we're going back. I think the first one I did was in 2003 or 2004, and I know I'm coming up. I've missed a few years, but I'm coming up on my 17th year doing Broad Street. So that was always a big thing in our family. Then
Mm.
my mom ended up joining in doing Broad Street, and then my brother also ended up doing Broad Street. So it's this like tradition of riding the subway up together, from Patterson Avenue up to the start, and just all of us, getting ready, psyched up, and then just running down Broad Street, and that's like just been one of our family traditions.
Got it. So it sounds like a family affair in terms of running. If your mom was doing it, your brother was doing it.
Yes, they
Yeah.
were. It was definitely me and my father. My mom was doing some, but like we were running the most, and then they joined in. I'd say got into it a little bit later. I definitely remember them. Their Broad Street counts, like how many they've done, is a little bit lower than us, and you know. But yeah, I do remember them coming into it a little bit later than us. But it was a family affair. Everyone was doing it, so we all kind of, you
Yep.
know,
That was your
yeah,
norm. That was your normal.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Do you know your best Broad Street time off the top of
My
your head?
best Broad Street time. I've been tracking this for years. I've been trying actually to get under 1 hour, and I've
Yeah.
come
Sub
close a
16.
few. Yeah, so it's like a lot of 101s, 102s,
Mm.
103s. I used to pretend. Another big runner from Philly is Cecily Tynan. She
Yes.
would do Broad Street every year, so she was always like literally right next to me at the start, and we had like similar paces, and I was always making sure I had to beat Cecily Tynan. Like she was my nemesis.
Yeah, she's quick. She's quick.
Very fast. She's also big into triathlon, I think as well, or maybe her husband was. So
Hmm.
remember always seeing her around events and stuff like that. But yeah, it was just. But now it's like I don't even. I'm not too concerned about that anymore. I mean, maybe I'll still go for it, but there's when you start adding speed into running, and like that's where injury starts occurring for me, and I'm not
Mm.
as focused as that anymore. And again, that's where this shift was going to running on trails, running on softer surfaces, not so concerned about time as much, and more about the experience of it and the things that I see, the places that I can go. And kind of getting away from the road racing. Road racing was a big part of my like early career, but now as I've gotten older and I'm learning about how to recover quicker.
Hmm.
I know that if I stay off those surfaces where I'm like pounding asphalt, I tend to just bounce back quicker from the training.
Got it. When was your first marathon distance? I feel like that's a bucket list item for a lot of people. So
Yeah,
when
so
was your
then
first marathon?
it was like both my dad and I signed up. We did it together. I think I want to say it was in 20, maybe 2000. Actually, it was either 2008 or 2009. I think it was the first year of it.
Okay.
And that was then like I did one. I enjoyed it, but it was super painful. It was typical, just like everybody else. It was at 20 miles. I hit the wall. I started struggling. It was
Hmm.
just like I had to go to like a walk run to get through it, and it was just like just the typical first marathon, like super painful. And actually, I really didn't enjoy it. Like I didn't
Hmm.
like see myself going back to it. But I was wrong. It's literally I just had to get over the pain and of remembering how bad that was, and then I'll sign up for another one as soon as you forget the pain of the first race.
That's right. That's right. It's like guy's version of childbirth,
Yeah.
but not nearly as bad, I guess. Okay, so that was like 2010-ish or so.
Yeah.
So, what was your next big distance? Was it another marathon, and how did that evolve?
So after the marathon, I there was always that love of trail running, and
Mm,
I started looking to see. I started to actually get into trail half marathons, and well, that was mostly what I could find at the time. So there actually weren't many trail races that you could find, but there was actually one guy who was putting on races at Pennypack Park, and his thing was Uber Endurance Sports is the name of his website, and his name is Stefan. And so he put on the first trail race that I run called the Sloppy Cuckoo. And it's just like because I guess because it could be muddy, it can be
hmm
it's kind of a wet course. There was two or three stream crossings, and that's kind of where it got its name. Um, so I saw that. I ended up doing it. I absolutely loved trail running. I liked the crossing streams. I liked the kind of the adventure of that. And I started looking at his site and like saw that he was offering like longer distances, and I kind of got introduced once I did his race into like I found out about the first longer than a marathon race that I did, which was called the Blues Cruise 50K, and that was the first like step up from the marathon that I started looking at, and getting into training for it, and looking at going like past the marathon.
Got it. And 50K, for those of you doing the conversion, is a little over 30 miles, right? It's 31 miles.
Correct. Yeah, 31.2 is
Got it.
the official distance, but
Now, the transition from the road to the trail, it sounds like a lot of that is mitigating injury and just kind of having fun with the scenery and not worrying so much about speed per se on a road race, but more about kind of enjoying running for the sake of running. So, did you get hurt at some point and you were like, you know what? Trail running is really where I want to focus so that I don't get hurt? Or was it?
constantly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so it was just whenever I was doing the road races, I was having the typical runner's injury. I would get it was called like top of the foot pain was one of them. I would get like plantar fasciitis.
Mm,
So that's underneath like the bottom of the foot.
hmm
I would just get like aches and strains. And what I noticed as I transitioned to trail running is that um, I saw that like I would run these on the trail and not on the flat path. I would do like the stuff that where I'm either climbing up hills or going down like rocky paths. I noticed that like I was sore, but it was more like it wasn't as localized. It tended
mm,
to spread out all through my legs and all through the lower body versus when I was running on asphalt. It was just like I would normally have like direct soreness in a specific area.
hmm
Um, so that kind of like keyed me off to like, all right, so the more time I spend on a softer surface, um, I tended to just bounce back quicker. So I just started going toward that route because I knew I could, get out there more, and it was just more enjoyable. It was like more things to see, more entertaining on the trail than if I was running on the road.
were you typically doing like trails around here? Were you having to drive far distances for running?
Everything. Have you been to like the Wissahickon and like Forbidden Drive and
Mm,
yeah? So if you've been there, like it's all of the like single track that they have there is where and Wissahickon has over 50 miles of trail. That's what they advertise as because they
hmm
actually had a challenge where they wanted everyone to try and explore all 50 miles
Okay.
of the park. And they were
And you
like
did that
having
in one
people.
day.
I tried it as much of it as I could because I didn't even realize that that park was that large.
Gotcha.
Um, but yeah, so I would go out and I would just like do little like 4 mile, 5 mile sections, anything that like loop back to the car. Again, like also trying not to get lost there because as
Mm,
I was new to it, I felt like you could like kind of get lost there and get turned around. So it just took time as I got more comfortable with the park and realizing like, how to find your way. Then I would add the miles on and just go a little bit further each time and, do certain sections and repeating them and stuff like that.
got it. As you're training for this, because Mel from the 5:30 a.m. class had asked this question, how do you add miles on? So, when someone is training for a 5K, that is one thing. When they are training for Broad Street, which is 10 miles, that's another. When they're training for a marathon, there are training plans out there for that. So, did you take any sort of, were you using any sort of plan? Did you have any coaches? Were you just winging it and just saying, you know what, I'm going to try to run more? than usual?
No, so I did like I did seek out like 50K training plans, and the kind of the bread and butter of all ultra mile, ultra distance training plans is that it's the back-to-back long runs. So it's doing that long run typically on a Saturday, and it could be upwards of 10 to 12 miles, and then you're following it up right the next day with an additional long run, and that's
Hmm.
to simulate the fatigue of what you're going to get come race day. Is that
Mm.
you're going to be so exhausted, your legs are going to be so tired, and then you got to keep running and kind of keep pushing through it. And that's what normally I'll end up doing is like I'm running pretty far one day, and then I'm just following it up normally on the weekend with a fairly long run, just to get in those back-to-back long runs and simulate that fatigue.
Hmm. Now let me ask you a logistical question because you're a parent, as many of our members are. So with two little kids, what's your schedule like to get these long runs in?
Um, well, yeah, it was definitely easier as when the kids were younger, and but it's most of it is I'm getting up at either like if I'm training and I'm getting right before a race, it's typical that for me to get up at like 3:50 in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning,
Hmm.
and get out and run literally as right up until I got to come home, get in the shower, and then like get the kids ready. So
Mm-hmm.
typically, well, most of it has been like it's 2 hours. It's like I'm trying to get in as many of those like the 2 hour like long run as I can. And the very important thing is that you have to match the terrain to the race that's coming up.
Mm.
So if it's a race that is going to be flat, then yes, like I'll be running around just a loop park, as many loops as I can. But if it's going to be like a rocky trail, like single track technical race, then I have to head out to the Wissahickon. I got to get, doing the climbs and practicing like power hiking. Like I mean, you think that you're going to run this entire thing, but really what you're going to do, you're going to do a mix of walk, run, power hiking, because power hiking actually uses a different set of muscles than running does, than walking does, and you're mixing that all together to just kind of get through the event, as really as fast as you can, efficiently as you can.
Let's talk about the hundreds because that's why I feel like people are here and want to hear about. You've run three 100-mile races, or you've
Correct.
entered three 100-mile races, right? So when was your very first one?
So the first one was in Titusville, Pennsylvania. I had never heard of the area. I was unfamiliar with Titusville before I found out about the race. But the reason why I picked that one was because it said it was very first time runner friendly because it's a looped course. You do three 50K loops
Hmm.
followed by like a 10-mile, like they call it, going home run. And Titusville, I think, is like it's known for these oil rigs, and like you're running around those, and they actually still have like one of the original oil rigs. Like they replicate it running, so they get a speaker during the race, and like they're blasting like the oil pumping, like so in the middle of the night you can actually hear it. Like that's like one of the points that you're running to. Um, so that was the first one. And that I ended up being really caught off guard because one of the things that can actually really affect the first time you're doing 100 is the weather, and you really never know what you're going to get. That race ended up I think the first loop was fine. It was nice and clear. It wasn't too cold, and it was on the second loop that it was just torrential downpour. I mean, it was just like coming down as hard as I remember just walking on these trails, and it's just like a river was just
Hmm.
flowing straight down them. It was just a battle to try and avoid blisters and chafing and like getting out of wet clothes because the rain eventually did stop. Getting out of wet clothes, getting on dry clothes, like lubing things up, like
Mm-hmm.
lubing up
Mm-hmm.
toes, and the whole thing just became a trying to keep the health of your feet alive,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because you can have certain things in a 100-mile race go south, and it ends up ending the race for you. So some of those things could end up being stomach issues. If you are one of the things that people have to get used to is actually running and eating and being able to take in certain foods and kind of quickly digest them. And because what happens, like, and people don't realize this, is that as you run, the blood actually from is kind of shunted away from your stomach, and it goes to your muscles, and
Hmm.
you actually like just don't process food as well.
Hmm.
So it normally tends to be like simpler foods. It's not going to be anything heavy or complex. It's going to be candy, soda. It's all the type of stuff I would never let my kids eat. It's like when you're looking at these aid station tables, it's just most of it's junk food.
Hmm.
Um, because the saying goes, I think, like, if the furnace is hot enough, anything will burn. And it's
Right.
kind of
Right.
like you're pushing the pace and you're just kind of throwing in everything in. And it works for some people. Some people, they need certain things that they have to have for their race and for their dietary, nutrition for a race.
Hmm.
But I am fortunate enough, I can eat almost anything. I haven't had any issues with my stomach. Um,
Yeah, I think we were talking about in class one day, Dean Karnazes, who has written. I think his book is Born to Run, but his wife would be rolling up like in an RV with pizza and be rolling it up, and he'd be eating it because at that point you're eating to fuel your body for this endeavor. Not You're not doing it for like health or anything. It's
yeah.
to literally just get through this race, right?
Yeah. The I've only met one thing that I couldn't eat on a race, and this was my second race. It was Vermont. We hit an aid station, and this lady's like, "It's my birthday." I was like, "Oh, cool." She's like, "They even got me birthday cake." I was like, "Oh my God, birthday cake!" And I was like, "This is probably a bad idea," but I was like, "All right, I'll take a slice," because she was offering it. I was like, it's her birthday. I have to
Right.
be, nice to her.
Yeah.
I'm like eating the birthday cake. It was no more than a mile after I left the aid station. I just started hurling birthday cake
Oh
up
my
again. It
god.
was just, yeah. So that the birthday cake is the only thing I've met in a race that I can't stomach.
Yeah. So you're avoiding anybody with a birthday on
Yes.
race day. Okay. Fair enough. So Titusville,
So
how did Titusville go for you in the
So
end?
managing my the just the how wet I was able to get through it. And the biggest thing that ended up happening is I met two people along the way. It was not their first 100, and they ended up kind of coaching me through it. We would get to aid stations, and I was just like feeling destroyed. I was like,
Hmm.
they were kind of picking me up. They were, telling me like anything motivational to kind of like get me up, get me going. Right? They were going through the checklist of like, they had broken it out for the aid stations, how far each aid station was,
Hmm.
and they made it really kind of systematic with how they were approaching it and how they were trying to finish it. And that was like a big thing I learned there, is that you really have to, when you're taking the 100-mile distance, it's like, how do you eat an elephant, like a bite at a
One bit
time?
at a
And
time. Hmm.
yeah, so I was just, that's what they were doing. They were breaking it down with like, all right, we just have to focus on getting through this section. And, you know, a big thing of the ultras is that you end up packing up, they call them drop bags. So you get to like actually load the things that you want, and they will normally spread them out through the race. So there might be 3 locations out of like maybe 10 aid stations that you'll have access to drop bags. So they were always talking about like what they put in them. I loaded my own, but I wasn't like crazy about getting to them. But like the one guy was like, "Oh, I got a Rockstar energy drink at aid station 2," and he couldn't wait to get to it. Another person was like, "I have a toothbrush at aid station 3," because they're like, "I've been eating junk food all day and I just want to like brush my teeth." And that he was like,
Hmm.
it's a game changer. Like the toothbrush in at mile 67 will like completely revitalize you, is what he was
Amazing.
telling me. I was like, okay. I was like, if you say so. So ended up, we powered through it. We all got through the night, which is kind of the hardest part of it. Is there were sections where I thought they were gonna leave me behind, but I was like struggling to keep up. And it's, in the end, is like we got through it. Got all the way to like mile 90, which is like the last time you hit an aid station, and then it was just like a 10-mile run in. And I just never felt so much pain in my life. And but I was just happy that I kept moving. Like the
Hmm.
big thing is like, blisters and all the other things that happen. still was able to just keep moving through the race and just, one step at a time and just like got to the finish.
And what was your time for that race?
It was long. It was like a 20, I think it was like 28:30, if I remember, or like it was somewhere around the 28-hour mark. And so it was over a day of running. Not what I had expected.
Mm-hmm.
I had expected a lot faster time, but then there was so much rain, and because it was a looped course where people were running through it, the people right after the rain just tore up the course, and it was
Mm.
just mounds of mud. So I mean, you really couldn't even run because it
Mm-hmm.
was like shoe sucking mud. Like I literally was right next to a guy. He pulls up and he just his shoe was gone, and his sock
Shoes
is
like back
there.
in the mud. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm literally like he's holding my arm, and he's trying to like put his foot back into the shoe so he can like pull it out cleanly, and and just, so it was just way harder than I think any first 100 should have been, and it had like a 62% drop rate is I think what I
Wow.
had calculated. So there was a large portion of people that just didn't make it. It was just too hard of a day, and then like that's the type of stuff like. I think the saying is like, um, you know, shit, what was it? I just heard it on like the other day. It's like the hardest thing you've ever done is the hardest thing you've ever done. And it was like once I got through that, it was like kind of opened up this world, like whatever can happen to me or whatever situation could I be in that I'll ever have to do something like that is so challenging,
Mm-hmm.
so painful, and so trying.
I imagine do they have cutoffs? So like especially on a loop where if you don't hit a certain time, they're gonna pull you off the course, so
Yes.
that there's a final cutoff.
Yeah, so I don't think I was for this race. I wasn't racing the cutoffs. I wasn't that close.
Mm-hmm.
I was a pretty well above because they say, like I said, it was a beginner friendly race, so they have very generous cutoff times. But other
Gotcha.
races will
Gotcha.
be more strict with the cutoff times. Yeah.
Okay. So how did that pain compare to the marathon pain that from your first marathon?
So, what's funny is I always say this to people because like I tell them that even a 5K can be just as painful as a 100-mile race because it's the intensity at which it's run.
Mm-hmm.
So, the 5K, the 10K, 10 mile, any distance kind of has they're all different because the pace at which you run them at, I've found is always different. So like another typical thing I always talk about ultras. I say that like an ultra is like life in a day because you start out fresh, you're just born. Everything feels great. There's no pains. You're running fine. You're laughing. You're having a great time. You start to hit 50-mile mark, middle age. It's like things start to hurt. My knees are aching. Everything is like kind of like a problem. And then it's like the later miles are like death. You're like literally coming in. You're bent over. You're just like really crawling to just get to the finish, and it's all like it just it's this whole range of like you go from highs to lows, and I don't know, you go through the whole gamut of emotions through one of these things. But as for pace and pain,
Mm-hmm.
it's they're all so different, and it's just each one is different. Like a 5K um, can be intense in its own way, just like the
Yeah.
marathon is, and just like the 100-mile is.
So when was your next 100? And did it take you a while to figure out you wanted to do another 100? Like after the first one, you were like, you know what, that's done. Hit a goal of running 100. I don't have to do any more. Or were you like, you know what,
Now,
I like this. This is for me.
well, it did take some time because I got over it and I was like, man, like I'd said before, it wasn't until the pain had subsided
Mm-hmm.
of that first race that I was like, all right, like I started looking at like, well, what are some other scenic, like fun races that are close by that I could do? And that's where I ended up. It was the following year I looked at Vermont, and the Vermont 100 is actually a very unique race. It's actually a it started off as a horse race, and I think like well, I mean, if you want to go into the histories of ultras in general, they were horse races, and the
Mm.
actual very first 100-mile race the guy's horse ended up going lame, and he couldn't run with the horse in his race, but he ended up running the race. He
Hmm.
ran, and this was back in I think it was in the 70s. I don't know my history that well, but so Vermont was actually one of the original horse races that ultras had come from.
Gotcha.
So it was so cool. Like there was only I think 20 horses that were in the race, but they the runners ended up going off first, and then the horses are released afterward. And it's just like they're just amazing to see on the course, and you're running side by side with them in some of the most scenic, kind of, mountainous terrain that you can imagine.
Hmm. So Vermont, 100 miles. How is that race experience compared to the first one?
So again, the weather wasn't on my side for Vermont. Ended up being I think it ended up going up to 100 degrees that day, and I actually got a call for one of my parents' friends who is an ultra runner and big time fitness enthusiast. He's a coach. He's gone to Kona, which is the triathlon, kind of, the Ironman triathlon, like finals is in Kona,
Hmm.
Hawaii. And so he actually called my dad and he said, like, look, like, I see what the temperature is going to be. He's like, you have to go out painfully slow. Like, you don't realize how much the heat ends up, your body gets taxed in the heat, and it's going to end up affecting everything with your running. So don't try and bank time, as he was, like most people think, like,
Mm.
oh, I'm just going to, like, I'm going to shoot out like while it's nice and cool in the morning. I'm going to bank some time, and then like I'll be able to make it up, like, just later. Now he's like, you have to start off painfully slow. And I swear, if it wasn't for that little piece of advice, which I did, I didn't go, flying out. I just stayed in the back. I just waited. And I knew that like the whole thing was going to be just getting through that intense heat, and then like getting to the nighttime, when it would be like easier to run. And interesting tidbit about like that race. One of the things that the horses have to go through, and I'm also big into this with my training, is they have hold stations for the horses. So this is also just to check the health of the horses. So
Mm.
what they'll do, as a horse comes into a station, they let it rest for a second, they get its heart rate, and then they'll do a gallop with the horse in the station, and they'll check its heart rate to make sure that its heart rate actually will come back down. So if the horse can't control its heart rate, or its heart rate is just staying too elevated, they'll end up either pulling the horse from the race, or the horse won't be able to just continue. And one of the big things that like I'm into is heart rate training, heart rate variability, and I don't know if you've ever heard of like the Phil Maffetone and the Maffetone method.
I've not heard of the method method. No.
So he's got a real basic formula. It's 180 minus your
Oh,
age,
so
and
yes, I didn't know
yeah,
I
okay,
added that in,
okay,
but yeah,
yeah, that's his
sure.
his whole thing. He was a big time like triathlete trainer, and he trained like some of the top athletes. And his whole thing is that you're trying to build this aerobic base, and you are training in a range to build that base. You're also eating foods that kind of conform with more of a fat burning, like you want to like, you're trying to use like your longer energy stores versus like being
Yeah,
so
your
kind of like,
ketones. Yeah, instead
yeah,
of
like
glycogen. Yeah.
exactly. So it's just like funny to hear that about the horses, and I've always that's the big thing I try and monitor when I'm doing these races. I am keeping an eye on my heart rate, trying to keep it in that zone, because I do think it is like a window into overtraining,
Hmm.
overexerting yourself, and people just probably running too fast, where cortisol is released like a stress hormone, and then that ends up you know causing injury and overtraining, and just there's like a whole host of injuries that end up coming with just actually running too fast for what your aerobic system can handle.
So, what was your time for the Vermont race?
So Vermont, I think, ended up being so Vermont has a 30-hour cutoff, and I ended up, I think, coming in 29 something. It was like 29,
Wow.
another like 29:30, or so cool thing about that is, again, first race, I had two people that helped me through it. Vermont has a pacer matchup system. So I asked for a pacer that could run 30 miles. And I didn't think anything about that until I actually started running with people come race day. And like, yeah, like I have two pacers, I have three pacers. I have this pacer is going to run 10 miles with me here and another pacer. Um, I just said, well, can someone just run the whole, because that was the max. You weren't allowed to have a pacer before that. You could only have them from
Got it.
70 on. So I said, oh, could I just have one pacer through it? And they did find someone, and it was this guy named Mark Richardson, and he was someone that wanted to come out. He wanted to try, see what Vermont was like, and he ended up meeting me at mile 70, and he was a lifesaver. Just another person that I met on the course, and I just met him for the first time the day before, and we just hit it off. We were talking through the whole thing. He was keeping an eye on me, making sure keeping on with eating food, just all the different types of things that you're trying to watch out for. They ended up having like horrible horse flies. Like I've never been in an area where the flies are so aggressive and they're just literally attacking you the entire time. So he ended up having like a mask that you could wear like for a face covering to keep the flies out. And he, all these different things. He told me a trick about like I had a headlamp on. He said move it down around your waist so like the flies aren't like coming for the light. So all these different things. He ended up helping me get through it, and kind of like another thing was like I ended up the heat was so intense that like it started causing I had vision loss in my left eye, and I think it was just like a more of a fatigue thing, like a muscle was either just strained, I guess, because I was getting double vision. I told him this. I said, look, I just got to lay down and like sleep for like 5-10 minutes. So he's like watching me on the side of the road as I'm sleeping, but he's keeping an eye on the clock because he knows that like we got a 30-hour cutoff. And I just remember him waking me up, and then we were able to run that thing in and finish it out with a decent time. And same thing, it was another day where like more than half the field ended up dropping from the race because of the intense heat.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
What year was that?
That was 2019.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 2019.
And amazingly, well, there's a lottery to get into these races. There are so many people that want to run these races that I actually first had to get selected for it, which I did, and then that whole story goes with getting into it. But
now your most recent one was this past, well, I guess now 2 weekends ago.
Yep.
So talk about that one.
Okay, so what I was hoping for with the third time was there's a big emphasis around 24 hours with ultra running. And I was looking for a course that was like somewhat scenic. It was again close that I could not have to travel too far to. I didn't want to have to fly a plane. And I ended up finding the Pine Creek Challenge, which now it's classified as a challenge, so it's really more just a completion thing. They don't like give awards for first, second, third, or age group or anything like that. It's just more about your own setting, like kind of your own personal time that you're trying to complete it in. And I was like, this is it. I was like, I think I could, it should be pretty easy to go sub 24 in what they say is a pretty flat, easy race.
And was it flat and easy?
It was. Now it wasn't easy, but I ended up it was a whole different set of hurdles that like I was trying to kind of overcome with this race. So the flat terrain ended up kind of doing what I had talked about with running on the road. I started kind of getting that repetitive stress injury in like certain muscle groups in my legs. And it was just like, I was like, oh crap, this is like, a lot more strain on not the like your entire leg or just the entire lower part of your body. It was more like on specific muscles. So it was a different type of pain I think I felt than other races where it was more localized versus a general pain. So I ended up same thing with this. I met there were 3 people that I ended up running with in the beginning. One of them kind of dropped back. Another guy was way faster runner. He ended up kind of going ahead at one point. And most of the race I had run. Oh my God, I'm like blanking on her name. It was my God, what Michelle. I ended up meeting Michelle at probably around like mile 20 or so, and same thing. It's just like we were just like kind of battling in it together. We had a similar pace, we had a similar goal, both trying to go for sub 24 hour. And she was just like someone there that could like kind of take your mind off the pain. I mean, the big thing like you're trying to do with this is just like kind of get your mind off the miles and get your mind off of what you're going through, and distract yourself. I mean, I guess you could do. There's many ways you could do it. You could maybe put on music, but I found that like during these events, if you can hook up with someone who has a similar pace, and is a fun person to be around, you'll end up just having a great time at these things and just doing actually just better in the race in general.
So the question on everyone's mind is, did you meet your 24-hour goal?
Yes. So we it was kind of like one of those same things. Like the whole time that we're on the trail, like I had this little printout. It was just like a little grid of the race, and it was the mile markers. It was like access, if you have access to a drop bag, do you have access to your support crew, and it was also the little breakdown of the miles per aid station, like how far you'd have to go to the next aid station.
Mm-hmm.
So I was literally studying this thing because in my mind I would hit one of them and I'm like, all right, one down, like 20 to go. And I was like just checking these things off. But I literally could ask Michelle like, all right, how much is it to the next? And I'm like fishing for my thing, and she would literally spout out the exact mileage of what it was to the next aid station. So she had this whole thing memorized. And that's what we did. We were just like, we were getting through aid station after aid station. Again, like you're eating some of the food you find there. It's all junk food, but one of this, I was able to take down some donuts at one of the aid stations. Didn't have any issues. They had pizza there. I'm just trying to think of some of the weird stuff, but yeah, it was just like same thing. It was just clicking off aid station after aid station until it would started to kind of get later at night, and then it's like you start to kind of feel the cumulative fatigue of the day, and it was just like just a tiredness. And unfortunately I wasn't I normally you can get coffee at some of these aid stations, but I think we ended up hitting like mile it was like 80 or so, and the aid station which I thought would have it didn't have any, and they said like, oh well, I think they have it at aid station 90. So then it was just like, all right, so I'll just get there, and I was just like, I'll get to that point, get some coffee in me, and that really can like turn it around for you in a race.
Mm-hmm.
It is normal to have caffeine in like the drinks that you have, but like it just wasn't, I guess, enough caffeine in the drink that I was using for this race.
I think in
But
your blog post you talked about having maybe next time packets of instant coffee.
yeah, like just something to kind of like because you're dealing with sleep deprivation. It's common. I've heard many stories of people hallucinating while they're on the trail and just seeing things that aren't there, like because you're going so long without any type of sleep, the mind starts playing tricks on you. Like they were telling us that there was a rattlesnake on the side of the road, so like you start thinking you're seeing things, or like you start seeing shapes that are jumping out from the side. Pretty sure I saw like a small little bear that like ran into into the side of the little where the little stream was. It's like, I don't know. It's like you start like questioning your insanity once you're out there for long enough.
They make caffeine gum. I'm not recommending this to everybody, but yeah, they make and it was originally developed for like LEOs, law enforcement officers, or like fighter pilots who they needed to stay awake, but they also couldn't be like slamming down cups of coffee in case they had to.
Do you know how many milligrams of caffeine it has? Like what the equivalent?
So nowadays there's a ton of different brands, but there's definitely ones that I've had in the past just to try it that were at like 200 milligrams per piece of gum. So that's like a cup of coffee. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what is a cup of coffee? Is it 100 or is it 200?
It's 200. Yeah, but
okay.
Depends on the cup, right? Like you get a cup of coffee from Starbucks, a grande is like 400 milligrams. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, anything like you're really looking for any type of thing that can kind of help turn it around. So I got the coffee, and I felt so much better. Like we were able to go back and forth. She would push the pace, I would push the pace. There was like we were going between a walk run combo because at this point we were like, kind of just like you just know that you're going to hit your goal. So like we knew like doing the math, like, all right, we should hit this aid station at this time. And like, all right, we're going to be under 24 hours. Now she was like third. She was like, I think she was the second place female for most of the race. So
Hmm.
we were trying to like, we'd see some girls pass and like, we'd like try and like, oh, maybe we should like speed it up a little bit. And so there was a little bit of like a game going on there. We were just trying to keep ahead of certain people. And I think she ended up being like, she was like third place female in the race, and she was happy to have completed it. That was a big thing. Like I remember my first race and how important it was when the people had helped me through it and what a difference it made. And like I kind of saw that. I was like, well, I mean, I don't think I could have gone any faster anyway, but I did see that there was an opportunity to like, help push her through this to help her complete her first 100-mile race. And I know it has a huge impact, had a huge impact on me. And I was like, oh, well, if I get a chance to do that for someone, like I'd definitely do it.
It sounds like through these races, the common theme to help you finish is running with other people, is to have that,
Yes.
the camaraderie, even though everyone's running their own race, the fact that you're just there for each other, keep some conversation going, get your mind off the actual running and the pain, and, you know, the human aspect is definitely huge.
Yeah, it's I don't this is it's completely unlike any other road race, 5K. No one's going to talk to you in a 5K. No one's going to talk to you in even a marathon. Maybe a marathon. But when it goes for these longer trail events, because some of these inclines can be so steep that you're hiking up them anyway. And like, why wouldn't you talk to the person next to you? Like they're
Mm-hmm.
hiking right there with you. Like
Mm-hmm.
everyone's going through the same suffering together. So it just creates this like instant bond with complete strangers. And people will tell you, I mean, pretty intimate details because they feel like they know you, or they feel like they're suffering with you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I've had some of the craziest conversations and just, you know, stuff that like you would not, that no one would you would meet on the street would tell you some of the things that they would tell you in like these ultra events. And I have never found anything like that. And it has to be from that just shared suffering.
Yeah. Or the fact that you're hallucinating because you've
Yeah.
been running and you've been awake for that long.
You just don't care anymore.
You
Like
just
you
don't, yeah,
literally
you don't
like,
even care. Yeah.
yeah. I was like, what are they gonna do? Who cares? I'm never gonna see this person again. Like,
Right.
like what does it matter? I tell them anything.
Well, part of being in the military, not that I was in the military, but the whole point, a big point of PT and a big point of basically beating down, privates or whoever, when you enter the military, is the shared experience. Is to create a bond, because if your higher ups are making all of you as troops, do this hard thing, then you're gonna bond together closer. Like part of it is definitely psychological. Obviously, there's the physical aspect, but part of why they do this tough training is so that the troops bond together, that because they
Yeah.
have that shared suffering, which is a lot like CrossFit. Um,
That's what I was gonna say. Don't you? That's what I get when I go to CrossFit. I get hints of that, like in the 5:30 class, and like we all have to do it together. We all suffer through it. I get some of that in small doses. I mean, these
mhm.
like these little hour-long classes are. I feel that same type of thing, but just in a little mini dose,
Mhm.
because it's
Yep.
a short little workout.
Right.
It's intense.
Right.
We all go through it together, and then we all finish. And
Yep.
like that's what kind of brings me back to it.
Now you started actually coming up on a year, on 2 years, because I think it was October of 2019. So was that before or after that second 100-mile race that you did in 2019,
So I
the
remember
Vermont one?
for the very first 100-mile race, I actually used jujitsu so I'm always trying to train the mental side of this, which I think is the
Mm,
hardest thing to do with ultra running. Is like I think the physical training and the running and putting in the miles is simple. Like anyone can do it. You can follow a training plan. You can just look one up online and just like follow it blindly, and maybe you can get through it. But the what normally gets most people is that negative chatter that starts happening once things get very difficult, once things get painful. And so I'm always looking for, well, what's something different I can do that's like extremely difficult that can kind of like, it's a muscle like anything else. Like, can you literally strengthen the muscle of, um, you know, not giving up, like, and just
Mm-hmm.
like pushing through pain. So I had first tried jujitsu and I had really enjoyed it. I did it for 8 months. I was progressing. I was getting stripes on my white belt, and the only reason I ended up stepping away from it was the time didn't work out. It was always late at night, and it would ended up I'd come off from jujitsu and I was just wired. Like I
Mm.
couldn't come down off the high of like it was like with rolling with people and you're trying to do these submissions. It was another thing just like CrossFit where you create a bond with people, but it was just in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just too late and it didn't work out with my schedule. So I was like, I'll take a break from it. And I ended up running a 50K. There was this lady I was talking to, and she was just going on and on about CrossFit. And we were running together, and we were probably 3 miles from the finish, and she just dropped me. And like she was so strong, like literally, like in her back, I could see like the muscles, and like I was like, it was just like from CrossFit. She was saying like how much CrossFit had helped her running. I was like, well, shit. I mean, like, I was like, I was like, I have to try that. Like,
Yeah.
so I remember it was after that race, after that experience, I was like, I'll go try. And I also, um, my daughter, goes to school with Shannon,
Mm-hmm.
and parents, another member of the
Yep.
gym.
Sean and Chrissy. Yep.
And yes, and so they were telling me, I had met them, and they were telling me about CrossFit and
Mm.
how much they liked their gym. So it kind of got me, it was just like a perfect timing of these people telling me, well, how much they like CrossFit, how much it could help me, and
Mm-hmm.
how like I'd be so good at it because there's running in it. I was like, okay, sign me up.
Not that kind of running, but
Yeah, yeah, not the yeah, but yeah. So like like we were saying, there's hints of that community, and that shared suffering that I see in the classes in the morning, and it's kind of what keeps me coming back to it. And I've just enjoyed it so much, as especially during COVID and the lockdown, and having like a routine to do something, to get out of the house. As I work from home, I'm here all the time.
mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think it helps train that same mental side of for to help with ultras, because I like the fact that like I come into class, I don't know what the workout is. I specifically don't look it up,
Mm.
and I have to just try and figure it out. And I have to like, it's going to be like some workout I may be good at, may not be, but I have to just literally power through it. And it's the same thing in ultras, is that the race will throw crazy things at you. You have no idea what's going to happen, and you just kind of have to power through it. And so it's a little bit of a practice of that every single day that I go to the gym.
Mm-hmm.
It's how well can you handle a situation that you're unsure if you're going to do well at, and
Mm-hmm.
how well can you get through it?
For sure. There's absolutely the physical training aspect side to it, but I find the 6 inches between your ears, like what happens between your ears, to me is the bigger part of it, right?
Oh
Because
yeah.
a lot of people tend to end up doing things they never thought they were capable of, right?
Oh yeah.
Lifting more weight than they ever thought they would, running more than they ever would. Maybe not for you, but for a lot of our people who hate running, they're suddenly running 400s, 800s, and they never thought they would be a runner, right?
Yep.
I find it interesting that, or maybe this is more of a question. So when you started, did you ever have that thought of, since you are a long distance runner, that strength training would put on weight that you didn't want or need, or was that not even a concern?
No, I do think about that, because like I'm going to be carrying that extra bulk
Mm-hmm.
with me every single step of the way. I mean, these races are like you're kind of calculating everything that you have to carry, and that's
Mm-hmm.
even down to how much water that you're going to carry on you.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I mean, I just think that because of how much mileage I do, I don't think I will ever like bulk up. And I
Mm,
never go crazy heavy,
mm-hmm,
in the gym that would, could make me bulk up or
mm-hmm,
um but like I'm okay with that because like I'm not trying to win these things like I still am like struggling at the 100-mile distance and the even like the 50K and longer. Like I'm trying to like dial it in with the training and how much and what my perfect race weight is and
mm.
diet and nutrition, and it's so many things and gears and knobs that I'm turning to try and figure this thing out that I still don't have it, and I'm still tweaking as I go. And I don't know. I definitely would say that I don't want to be too big, but like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'll ever have that problem. It's just like because the running and weightlifting, like they don't really mix. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't think could you really ever get too big? Like, I don't think I spend the time in doing it. I don't know. It's kind of like a,
Chances are, after almost 2 years, if that were to happen, it would have happened.
yeah,
So a
yeah.
lot of it is genetics. I would also say nutrition plays a big part of it. And then you're right, like the volume and the types of weights you're using matters a lot. For, like I said, if you were genetically disposed to bulking up,
Mhm.
as being, you know, more of an ectomorph, than a mesomorph, then that would have already happened, but it hasn't.
Okay.
So to me, it sounds like the pro of the mental training, the mental toughness, far outweighs any sort of negative or con of the physical training side of it
Mm.
in terms of like possibly adding some bulk or some weight.
Well, that's a good point about the diet because one thing I didn't mention is I'm big on intermittent fasting, and
Mm-hmm,
there's a huge reason for that because most of these races are going to be about how well can you metabolize fat as fuel,
mm-hmm,
and I'm taking in carbohydrates, but there's always the saying like fat burns in the flame of carbohydrates. Like I don't know if you've ever
mm-hmm,
heard that saying, but so you're going to be taking them in to help you burn fat.
mm-hmm,
So one of the big things that like I started like a while ago is like during the week I do intermittent fasting. I don't eat late at night, and like I'm normally not, when I first started I didn't have my first bite until 9 o'clock, but then like as I got better with it I'm not having that first bite until 11 o'clock.
mm-hmm.
And I found that once I started doing that, and this was like a year ago, that completely changed like my energy level. Like I felt like I could do these longer runs and longer type of races, and it was just easier. Like I just had more energy because I wasn't riding the roller coaster of like small meals and like kind of just like constantly putting food in my mouth to kind of fuel myself. I was specifically like doing the time restricted eating
Mm-hmm.
to help promote fat burning, and that was another thing that I guess would stop me from bulking up ever because
Sure.
I'm not probably taking in the calories that would be needed to
Mm-hmm.
put on that mass.
Exactly. Yeah. I also like the cognitive advantage of intermittent fasting, and for me, I feel more sharp when I'm running on more ketones than carbs. So
Oh
I don't know if,
yeah,
I don't
and
know
it
if you get that, like the cognitive edge, feeling more
absolutely.
dialed in, more focused.
Yeah, yeah, no, and that's another like, and that's common. Like everyone says the same thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
they feel like they're sharper, when they're in a fasted state.
Yep.
And it's just like, but I've found like I'll do it Monday through Friday because I on the weekends, like with the kids and the schedule, I'll just like they're my cheat days. I'll
Sure.
Saturday, Sunday, eat whatever. Then Monday through Friday, back into that routine.
Mm-hmm.
And I found like that works the best for training, for running, and just everything for having like the energy level to keep up with the kids
Yep.
and to still keep doing these races.
Cool. Love it. I was going to ask you about nutrition, so I'm glad we got to that. I want to wrap up because it's been actually almost an hour.
Huh.
Reshmi asked advice for someone new to running. So Reshmi is not afraid to say that she hates running, but she just ran her first 5K. I think it was this past weekend, um, or maybe the weekend before. So maybe she's not looking to do a 100-mile race,
Mhm.
right? But maybe she's looking to do Broad Street at some point. What would you recommend for someone like her?
I mean, I think there's no shame in the run walk combo. Like if you're doing a run and it feels like it's too hard on you, or it's too stressful, this gets me back to the heart rate. And like when things became like enjoyable, I was keeping an eye on my heart rate, and this is where this 180 minus your age.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that if you can get some type of device that helps monitor your heart rate, run at 180 minus your age, keep it in that zone, and you'll find that it takes to do the maffetone method. It actually takes like 3 to 4 months for your body to get used to it. So you're running, you will not let your heart rate go above that limit. And I did that for 3 to 4 months, and it's just like you're going to have a run, walk, and you'll see that you'll slowly be able to kind of push that run a little bit further before you have to start walking again. But what it made for me is it made it more enjoyable. Like, when your heart is beating out your chest, like something's wrong, and it's probably causing that type of stress on you that makes you feel like running does suck. Like it's just like it's not enjoyable when it's like that. Um, so I would say do the run walk combo, and I would look at the heart rate training. I think there's something there because it really is a window into recovery. And it can really help prevent that overtraining, and it really makes running enjoyable. I mean, like it totally changed it around for me when I started looking at heart rate. Now I don't even need to look at it. I can
Mm-hmm.
run
You
right
just
in
know.
that zone, and I'm just like I can run all day, and I know it's like I don't ever get tired of it, and that's what led to these things. Is like I knew I could do it because it felt comfortable enough, and you don't end up hating running.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Now we have another 100 coming up, right? Is that
Yes.
in a few weeks?
Yeah, it's well, because Broad Street got pushed back and I didn't plan this, I'm going to end up having like a 50K, then one weekend Broad Street, then 100 miles. So I'm debating if I should just not do Broad Street because that's just going to I'm probably not going to be able to recover in time. Um, so yeah, it's there's the 50K that it was the first ultra I did, so I want to do it. And then I'm trying to debate if I have to give up on Broad Street, but there's the whole family tradition there.
You're right,
So
right.
like I can't like not do that. And then there's the 100. So yeah, it's I'm a little torn, but yeah, I'm heading to that next 100, and hopefully it's gonna go well. And I'm hoping for this. I'm going back to Titusville, so I'm going back to the
Mm,
first 100-mile race I did, and I'm praying that there's no rain, and I'm praying that I have just dry conditions and I can run that course how I should have ran it, back in 2018.
cool. So what's on your I asked this for everyone on the podcast, but what's on your bucket list? And that can be running bucket list, or it could be just general life bucket list.
Oh man. I don't know. Well, the 200s in one year was actually one of the items. So I'm going to do that this
Hmm.
year. All knock on wood, if everything goes
200s
right.
within about a month. Yeah.
Yes. I don't. Now, I hate to tell you, there's also 200-mile races. Um, they are multi-day events. Um, I don't know if that's on my bucket. I can't even say it's on my bucket list. My wife would probably kill me if she found out I was trying to do a 200-mile. It's even more time I'd have to leave the kids. Um, it would probably just do some of the top 100-mile races. So it'd be like one of them is Western States is what
Hmm.
it's in. That's one of the like the original 100-mile races. It's a super scenic course, but it's a lottery. It can take up to 5 years to get into that, or 10
Hmm.
years to get into that race with
Hmm.
how their lottery system works. It'd probably be just to travel for some 100-mile races and see parts of the world I haven't seen, and that's what these things have. They've done originally, for me. Why I
Hmm.
got in them is just to see new places,
Hmm.
and I would just extend that to just see some further away places.
Yeah. We were talking about because I was reading up on Grand Canyon and how people do the rim to rim, which I think rim to rim is like 21 miles. So you'd probably end up doing at least rim to rim to rim, um, because less than a marathon is too easy. But
Well, wait a minute.
that'll
Have
be
you ever
pretty.
done a marathon or anything?
Yeah, I've done the marathon. That was on a bucket list. So did that in 26. So this was like 2012 or so, 2014,
Okay.
something like that. Yeah, yeah. So have done a marathon. Afterwards, said I would never do it again, mostly because of the amount of time it takes to train for that. or at least it took to train. I was doing cross at the time. Both, Diddy and I ran that marathon. It was poetic for her because she was precisely 26.2 ages, years old.
Okay.
So it was, poetic. And it was the Philly one. It was fine. Hit that wall, at mile like 22. Ended up like skipping the last few miles. Like literally skipping to like keep weight off one leg. Yeah, I would probably
What was the time for it?
3.5.
Oh,
Three
nice.
thirty.
That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt it went pretty well for having seized up one leg, cramping up, and the last few miles. Overall time was fine. I like Broad Street because I can do it without really training for it at all. Like it just the CrossFit training, the stuff we do in class is enough. I might go for a few longer runs just to get the feet used to the longer distances. I don't know. I'm someone where like if I hear something crazy and I feel like it's just one of those like crazy things to do, like talking to you about 100 miles. Not that I would necessarily do 100 miles, but skipping the marathon and going for like a 50K just to be able to say that I did that, right?
Yeah.
That's something that I would do. Not that I'm saying I'm doing right now, but that would be in my personality.
I just think like with your training and like just overall fitness and like what we talked about, how it puts different strain on different muscles, it's
Hmm.
not like a road marathon. So you could do a
Yeah.
50K, I think,
So
pretty easy.
so what I'm in, yeah, I've never done a trail run, right? So
Oh my God.
I've been on trails running, but I've never done a trail run, right? So the fact that you
Mm.
say that it hits all parts of the legs rather than just because what I didn't like was the constant pounding of the road.
Mhm.
So it sounds like from what you're saying, trail running may actually be, something I could get into,
Oh yeah.
which I had not considered. So
Oh,
yeah.
there's a lot of good races. If you want first time good races, they're at Pennypack Park.
Hmm.
There's a lot of trail races that happen there. There's some that happen at the Wissahickon. Some have been canceled this year because there was actually a trail half marathon and a trail full marathon at the Wissahickon.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, they're I would just find one, and it's a completely different game. It's just if you've never done a trail race, I would try one out and like it's they're fun. I mean, I really can't say enough about them.
Cool. Love it. All right. So we're going to let these other folks go. So I'm going to stop the live stream. But Pat, thanks for being on here and talking about your
Yeah.
races. And if
Yeah.
anybody has any questions, actually, so talk about your blog because I imagine you're a punk fan because play on words there.
Yeah.
Your blog is called
Uh,
Bouncing Souls, but not like the punk
yes, with
band.
a SOLES,
Yeah.
bouncing SOLES .com. That's just a journal. So I'm in IT and all that WordPress blogs and any of that type of stuff is just second nature to me.
Hmm.
So it was simple to just spin one up and
Yep.
all I do is I just write about just I try and like write what went there's one thing I try and do at my races like I've been doing it since I started them. I'd write what went right, what went wrong, and what I would do differently every single
Hmm.
race. And
Hmm.
I think it's a nice little tool to look back at when you go to these races the second or third time.
Yep.
What could you do a little different? And I've just learned so much just from journaling about these races. And people have contacted me, and it's a fun little just side thing I do just for the hell of it.
Cool. All right, guys. If anybody wants to follow Pat, follow him at bouncingsouls.com. He has a YouTube channel too, and obviously you're probably on Strava, right?
Just
Um,
yeah, yep.
yep. All right, guys. Thank you, and thank you, Pat.
Yeah. Well, thanks for doing this.
You got it.
All right, I'll see you.